For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the moon with wonder. Ancient civilizations worshipped it, sailors navigated by it, and scientists studied it. Yet one question remained unanswered. What would it be like to stand there? On July 20th, 1969, that question was finally answered. Nearly 650 million people, around one-fifth of the world's population at the time, watched as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of another world. It was a moment that transcended politics, nationality, and culture. For many, it remains one of the greatest achievements in human history. This is a quick run-through of Apollo 11, the first moon landing. Reaching the moon was never just about exploration. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers. Their competition extended beyond armies and nuclear weapons into science, technology, and prestige. Space became the newest battlefield. The Soviet Union took an early lead. In 1957, it launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. 4 years later, Yuri Gagarin became the first person to orbit the Earth, convincing many that the Soviets were winning the space race. The United States responded by creating NASA, but President John F. Kennedy believed catching up wasn't enough. In 1961, he set an extraordinary challenge. Before the decade was out, America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. It was an audacious promise. The technology barely existed. No rocket was powerful enough, and no human had ventured beyond Earth orbit. Yet over the next 8 years, more than 400,000 engineers, scientists, and technicians set out to achieve what many believed was impossible. The race to the moon had begun. Kennedy's challenge inspired the world, but turning those words into reality would require years of relentless innovation, testing, and sacrifice. NASA knew that reaching the moon couldn't be achieved in a single leap. Instead, it would be built step by step. Project Mercury proved that humans could survive in space, while Project Gemini pushed much further. Astronauts learned how to spend days in orbit, perform spacewalks, and, most importantly, rendezvous and dock two spacecraft together, a skill that would be essential for returning safely from the moon. Meanwhile, engineers faced an equally daunting challenge on Earth, building a rocket powerful enough to escape our planet's gravity. Their answer was the Saturn V. Standing 111 meters tall and producing 7.5 million pounds of thrust at launch, it remains one of the most powerful rockets ever successfully flown. Every mission depended on thousands of components working perfectly, because even a single failure could bring disaster. The astronauts trained just as relentlessly. They spent countless hours in flight simulators, practiced working in weightlessness, rehearsed moonwalks underwater, and studied geology so they could recognize valuable lunar samples. Engineers constantly introduced emergencies into simulations, forcing crews to solve life-threatening problems under intense pressure. Then, tragedy struck. On January 27, 1967, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed when a fire swept through the Apollo 1 spacecraft during a launch rehearsal. The disaster exposed serious flaws in the spacecraft's design and forced NASA to halt the program, while engineers carried out a comprehensive redesign. The tragedy stunned NASA. What had been a race suddenly became a lesson in humility. Engineers redesigned almost every aspect of the spacecraft, determined that the 3 astronauts would not have died in vain. Beginning with Apollo 7, NASA steadily rebuilt confidence. Apollo 8 became the first crewed mission to orbit the moon. Apollo 9 successfully tested the lunar module in space, and Apollo 10 rehearsed every stage of the landing except the final touchdown. By the summer of 1969, the hardware had been proven, the crews were ready, and after nearly a decade of determination, humanity stood on the brink of attempting its greatest journey. On the morning of July 16, 1969, hundreds of thousands of spectators gathered along Florida's Space Coast, while millions more watched on television around the world. After years of preparation, the moment had finally arrived. At precisely 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time, the mighty Saturn V thundered into life. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed, the rocket rose from Launch Complex 39A. carrying 3 astronauts on humanity's most ambitious journey. Mission Commander Neil Armstrong would lead the landing. Buzz Aldrin would pilot the lunar module. Michael Collins would remain in lunar orbit aboard the command module Columbia, waiting to bring his crewmates home. Just 12 minutes after launch, Apollo 11 entered Earth orbit before a final engine burn sent the spacecraft hurtling towards the moon at almost 39,000 kilometers per hour. Collins then carried out a crucial maneuver, separating the command module, docking with the lunar module Eagle, and extracting it from the spent rocket stage before the 3-day journey through deep space began. On July the 19th, Apollo 11 slipped into lunar orbit. After carefully inspecting the landing site in the Sea of Tranquility, Armstrong and Aldrin climbed aboard Eagle and undocked, leaving Collins alone to circle the moon. As Eagle descended, the mission suddenly entered its most dangerous phase. The guidance computer began flashing unexpected alarm codes, while the planned landing site proved to be littered with boulders. Taking manual control, Armstrong carefully flew the spacecraft beyond the hazardous terrain as Aldrin called out their altitude and the rapidly falling fuel supply. Inside Mission Control, every second felt like an eternity. With less than a minute of fuel remaining, Eagle finally settled onto the lunar surface. At 2017 UTC on July 20th, 1969, Armstrong calmly radioed the words the world had been waiting to hear. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Applause erupted in Mission Control, and around the world, millions celebrated. After centuries of wondering what lay beyond our world, humanity had finally reached the moon. Although the landing was successful, the mission was only half complete. Before leaving Eagle, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin carefully checked the lunar module's systems to ensure it would still be capable of carrying them back into orbit. Only then did they prepare their life support equipment, depressurize the cabin, and open the hatch. In the early hours of 21st July 1969, UTC, still the evening of 20th July in the United States, Armstrong slowly climbed down the 9-rung ladder. As an estimated 650 million people watched live around the world, he placed his left boot onto the fine grey lunar dust and spoke words that would become some of the most famous in history. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." For the first time, a human being was standing on another world. About 20 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined him, describing the landscape as magnificent desolation. In the moon's weak gravity, the astronauts moved with a distinctive hopping stride as they explored a world unlike anything seen before, silent, airless, and bathed in brilliant sunlight beneath a pitch-black sky. Over the next 2.5 hours, Armstrong and Aldrin carried out a carefully planned program of scientific work. They collected rock and soil samples, deployed experiments that would help scientists study the moon's interior, and installed a laser reflector that is still used today to measure the distance between the Earth and the moon with extraordinary precision. The astronauts also planted the American flag beside the lunar module. It symbolized the nation that had achieved the landing, while a plaque fixed to Eagle carried a message intended for the entire world. "We came in peace for all mankind." Before returning inside, they left behind a small collection of memorials, including a patch honoring the crew of Apollo 1 and medals commemorating Soviet cosmonauts Yuri Gagarin and Vladimir Komarov. A reminder that, despite the rivalry which had driven the space race, this achievement belonged to all humanity. With their time on the surface drawing to a close, the 2 astronauts climbed back aboard Eagle and sealed the hatch. They had fulfilled humanity's oldest dream. Now they faced one final challenge: getting home. After spending more than 21 hours on the moon, it was time to leave. On July 21st, 1969, the ascent stage of Eagle lifted off the lunar surface, leaving its descent stage behind as a permanent monument to humanity's first visit to another world. High above the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin rendezvoused with Michael Collins, who had spent the mission orbiting alone aboard Columbia. His role had been every bit as vital as the moonwalk itself, for without the command module, there would be no way home. Once reunited, the crew transferred themselves, their equipment, and 21.5 kilograms of priceless lunar rock and soil samples into Columbia. The lunar module was then jettisoned and Apollo 11 began the three-day journey back to Earth. On July 24, 1969, the spacecraft plunged into Earth's atmosphere at nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour. Protected by its heat shield, it endured temperatures of around 2,800 degrees Celsius before three giant parachutes deployed, slowing the command module for a safe splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Recovery crews from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet quickly retrieved the astronauts, who were placed into quarantine as a precaution against any unknown lunar microorganisms. After traveling nearly 1 million miles and spending more than 8 days in space, Apollo 11 had achieved what only a few years earlier had seemed impossible. The first journey to another world was complete. Apollo 11 was far more than a successful mission. It fundamentally changed humanity's view of what was possible. More than 400,000 engineers, scientists, technicians, and support staff worked together to make the moon landing a reality. Their efforts accelerated advances in computing, telecommunications, materials science, and engineering, innovations that helped shape the modern world. The mission also transformed our understanding of the moon. Across 6 Apollo landings, astronauts returned 382 kilograms of lunar rock and soil, allowing scientists to uncover the moon's history, study its interior, and better understand the origins of our own planet. Perhaps Apollo's greatest legacy came not from looking at the moon, but from looking back at Earth. Photographs such as Earthrise and the blue marble revealed our planet as a small, fragile world suspended in the darkness of space. For millions, they changed the way humanity saw itself, inspiring a new appreciation for the environment and reminding us that, despite our differences, we all share the same home. The Apollo program came to an end in 1972, but its story did not. Today, NASA's Artemis program aims to return astronauts to the lunar surface, help establish a long-term presence on the moon, and use that experience to prepare for humanity's next great destination, Mars. More than half a century after Apollo 11, the footprints left by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin still remain undisturbed in the lunar dust, a lasting reminder of the day humanity first stepped beyond its home world. The moon landing proved that even the most ambitious dreams can become reality through curiosity, courage, and cooperation. More than 50 years later, the footprints of Apollo 11 still lie undisturbed in the silent lunar dust. They remain a reminder that when humanity dares to dream together, even the impossible can become reality. One small step truly did change the course of history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this quick run-through of one of history's greatest achievements, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue bringing you concise, engaging stories from history.